Hey everyone, Julian with Behind Company Lines here today with John Cordier, CEO of Epistemics. Epistemics enables organizations to improve forecasts and manage risk by using interactive synthetic population to test strategies impacting health, economic, social, and environmental outcomes. John, I'm so excited to chat with you, not only because of your founder journey, but also Epistemics and what you're doing and the ability really to have this whole testing environment that doesn't actually impact people, and it still gives accurate results into whatever company kind of choose to test. So really excited to get to what that means for the future of testing and testing different types of scenarios and situations and anything in a population. But before we get started, describe to the audience, what the heck is a synthetic population?
Sure. Well, glad to be on. Thanks for having me. So the synthetic population in our context is a representation of every single person, school, household, and workplace in the entire United States. So some people might refer to this in common talk as a digital twin of the entire population. For a more technical minded person, what we're doing is we're taking available public data sets at the lowest level of granularity that we can from the census, Bureau of Labor Statistics, Department of Education, American Community Survey, data sets that a lot of people are using. But what we do with them is, let's say you have a zip code, and that zip code is supposed to have 1,500 people in it. Yeah. Well, what we do is we create a representation of a person as an agent of all 1,500 people there, and the distribution of age, race, sex, household income, how many people live in the households. All of that is within our synthetic population. The other thing that we've done is we've created a patterns of life model, is what some people might call it. Yeah. We'll call it like the background sociology of the US or whatever other country we're working in. So within the synthetic population, without any coding, like individuals are already going to school if they're school aged. And within the schools, there's certain types of contact patterns. And what we found is in the lower grades, they end up interacting pretty much with the people in their classes. Right. But as you grow out of elementary school into middle school, there's a little bit more interaction between grade levels. In high school, there's a ton of interaction between grade levels. Same thing can happen in the workplace environments. Depending on what the workplace is, number of people, you have a different number of people you might bump into during the day there. And specific to our synthetic populations, initially, we were in the graduate school of public health at the University of Pittsburgh, building this simulation platform and building synthetic populations to understand the spread of infectious diseases. Yeah. What we've adapted our synthetic populations to be able to study today doesn't have to be a disease, but like other things that transmit between people, like ideas or products, sentiment, like all those types of things. Sure. You can begin looking at from an interaction between people interacting with other people, or as the environment changes around a person, how does that influence that individual's behavior? Yeah. And that could be both like your physical surroundings and also what information you're being surrounded with too. So our synthetic population, some people might call it a digital twin, but like we look at it as a really rich data set that enables people to start asking questions about how populations are changing over time. Yeah.
And how do you incorporate the behaviors that people have within that synthetic population? Say if I'm X demographic, X gender, X, if I essentially have all the variables, how do you really account for behavior? Or is there already kind of a prescribed types of behavior that humans kind of already exhibit without having to say any interaction or any kind of input into that data model?
Yeah. So like a user of our software, they get to define like what the behavior and describe what influences that behavior. So in some cases, it could be as simple as individuals in the synthetic population that look like this, or they like the color blue. Well, we know people that like the color blue, and we have the agents that would all like the color blue. In this sort of situation, they behave in one way. Mm-hmm. And people that like the color blue are not as influenced by people that like the color yellow, but they are more influenced by people who like the color red or whatever it might be. And like, I'll use that as like a simplistic example. The use cases that we're getting into are things like what makes somebody vaccine hesitant, or what makes somebody more likely to believe something they see in the news and act on it than somebody else. What makes somebody how are you able to influence the decision that somebody makes to purchase a product through a user journey based off of not only like what information you're presenting to them, but how they interact with other people in their social network, other people at home, at school, at work. So I think the root of your question was, how do we represent behaviors? So one of the novel things that we've done at Epistemics is create what's called the Fred modeling language. So you can think of this as a new programming language that is specifically built to simulate behaviors of people with synthetic populations. So what a user gets to do is say like, all right, the synthetic population is already there. All I have to think about is what are the interactions that I'm trying to describe and how are those interactions impacting behaviors? And then when you run that simulation forward, you can see the range of outcomes that happen. So what our software is really good at is when there's a nonlinear change in a population behavior. So like very recently, and like a topical use case for agent-based simulation would be, well, this is like new jacking, but so the Silicon Valley Bank phenomenon that happened. So like everybody on, what is it, Friday last week, like wake up and was like, you know what, I'm going to like take all my money out of the bank. That wasn't something that was like their individual choice. They were influenced by other people around them and the behaviors of others. And the next thing you know, you get this like nonlinear, like big, like crazy phenomenon that happened. And next thing you know, the 20th largest bank in the United States fails. Like you begin seeing these nonlinear things that can happen when you're using this type of simulation. And the cool thing about it is like, we're looking at when those things happen in entire populations. So if people are familiar with the book, The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, he talks about like these social contagions that happen. And next thing you know, like there was like the one shoe that talked about like, it was a bunch of hipsters in Brooklyn, but then just like took off all over the place for, there used to be like a whole bunch of crime in one city. And then next thing you know, just like totally dropped off. And like, these are all based on behaviors of population, then the influences that we as individuals have on one another. So those are like the cool types of things we would look at Epistemics and what our users use our software to explore.
And if I'm a user using the software, do I see outputs of say multiple different possibilities within a certain event type? And so I can see kind of if things, happen, say, I'm a comic book guy, so in a different universe. So you have your pretty much your outline of different universes where decisions could have been made in one direction or another. Am I able to see a range of ways that a population is affected by said stimulus?
That's exactly it. So like, opposed to some like machine learning type approaches where you're like just getting like more and more narrow with like, this is like the outcome. Like what you get to see in simulation and using a synthetic population and agent-based simulation on top of it is the range of possible futures. That's something that we talk about, or the range of uncertainty. And the cool thing that you get to unlock are insights as to what trajectory like you're actually on with your business, with the health of your population, whatever it might be. So we're all about generating, and some people use like the term synthetic data. Simulation, I think, is always synthetic data. It's just like a way of rebranding it. You end up like generating these what if scenarios that give you insights into what an alternative future could possibly look like. And then you understand what trajectory you're on and how those different what ifs play out over time. So that's all things that users get to do. And they like the user gets to define like different states within the model, what they want to visualize. So a lot of times like we visualize stuff on a map because it's easy to see like the spread and propagation of something. And when people like see their neighborhood or their city and something like propagating across it, they connect with that much, much easier than saying like, here's another graph that, or here's a scatter plot that like you're supposed to like make the connection with. So it's another cool thing about our synthetic population, like decision makers, like more easily connect with the data that they're being exposed to.
And in thinking about it from a different not a different perspective, but from an outside perspective, looking in, one of the use cases, obviously, like you said, is like public health and how viruses spread and things along that nature. And another one is just being able to have the opportunity to experiment with so many different range of possibilities. And I guess more commonly outside of the public health in that sector, what are you seeing the technology really being used for and the use cases it's being used for now? And I'll start with that question. I got another one for you.
Sure. So one example would be in the insurance industry. So in insurance, they're always trying to predict or forecast what's going to happen over the next year. And all the different things that could happen.
Yeah.
What's the range? And then from that range, like, how do you get more certain about it? So the insurance market, big, like, really good market for us. So if you think of what the world experienced with COVID, like, let's say COVID was, I don't know if Pokemon cards like were this expansive, but like, let's say Pokemon cards like just became like the next new thing. Like no one's ever seen them before. Or there's like a movie that came out recently related to like, what if the Beatles didn't exist or whatever?
Yeah.
And create like that. All right. So let's say like the spread of that catching on is really a new product in a new market.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're a company taking a new product to market, understanding, are you going to get like some nonlinear viral spread of that product? So like truly going back to like the tipping point, from Gladwell example, I'm launching a product. Is it going to take off? How can I change the conditions around like the user community or the customers that I'm trying to get? To make it more likely that it'll take off. So marketing and forecasting in consumer goods companies are another area. And like in the insurance space, we're kind of changing the way that actuaries get to work with data by using a synthetic population. In the consumer packaged goods, demand forecasting, strategy planning group that exists within big companies. By starting with a synthetic population, we're also giving them a whole new way of looking at what they get to do with their jobs. So
And then one, obviously the skeptic in me is like, what happens when it goes wrong? What happens when they're the bad actor testing so many different types of things? Then you find that they're testing something in particular. And what would go wrong in that process? Is it the input of data? Is it the intention behind that input? I could see there's so much ambiguity without, I guess, keeping things within a certain degree of, say, requirements or certain value set. What have you seen kind of in your experience or in your kind of forecasting of ways somebody could use this in a, say, maleficent way?
Yeah. So this is something that I think founders of most technology companies have to grapple with. It's like, what is the alternative use of this type of a tool? And one of the ways that we're like setting up our platform so that we can combat that is because you're starting with a synthetic population, like that's a single source of truth for the data. So let's say that like you can like go back and say, all right, that's where the baseline data set came from. And then as you build your model and like there's different assumptions, you could say, okay, this data set was generated by this model. And the cool thing about what we get to do is that we're open sourcing all of the models that are down. Like companies can like say like, we don't want ours to be open, like, that's fine. It's their prerogative to do so. But our objective is to make the models open so that the assumptions can be tested, it's known, and it's like visible for the users and the decision makers. Why that's important is the decisions that people use the software like ours to do, they do impact the entire population. So like, let's say a mayor of a city running simulations to understand like where he or she's going to make investments, like that's going to impact large groups of people across the city. The insurance company, like they're going to like make a policy that might exclude a whole demographic group. Like, all of these things, like if they give individual people an ability to better influence the decisions that impact them. So if we use that as a baseline where a bad actor could use this data, like let's frame it in the idea of fake news or all of like the large language models that could be used to generate a whole bunch of like really negative content, or like the video image related stuff, like you do the same thing with. What ours would be used for is like to generate a data set, like could be used to like show something that's going to impact the community that might not be totally true or bad. So like those types of things would be how a bad actor would use software. But the one thing about it's like, you have to look at how much does data influence the behaviors and decisions of individuals. And that's like the power of a tool like ours is like by making the models open and like one source of truth to the data, people can trust data more and like can say like, oh, we're going to move to data informed decision making. The time where that gets like turned around and used negatively, I mean, that's going to undermine the entire use of data and AI to help inform decision making. So it's certainly something that we have to be aware of as we grow over time.
Yeah. I've seen, I think the only company that does synthetic populations and in testing in those environments, but I've had other companies who kind of use this synthetic data to whether it's give insights or come up with different outcomes if they have certain inputs in particular, like a product or a feature set or something like that. Is this whole synthetic data fad, is it a fad? Is it something that's going to move away as data is becoming more and more better indexed, better labeled, and better retrieved, and honestly, better manipulated? Is this something that's going to go away? Is there something that's going to, say, replace it in the near future? Or is it an underutilized tool that we'll see more of a gaining popularity of it moving forward?
Yeah, I think it'll gain in popularity. The other thing to note is like there have been companies that have been using what's been rebranded as synthetic data for a long time.
Yeah.
And so I think like a lot of technologies, sometimes like maybe there's like a 20-year life cycle of like where one term is like really catchy. And so businesses use that to like get adoption. I think synthetic data has a little bit of that. There's like the GAN side of things, like people have been using that for a while. People have been replicating data sets, de-identifying data sets for privacy reasons for like a number of years. So I think synthetic data has been around, but I think for those that are new to like this concept, it'll just continue to get adopted. One example I can talk through, like a lot of times these like more like hot technologies can only get adopted by the biggest companies.
Yeah.
One example might be like Twitter, for example. So Twitter, this guy's no longer at Twitter, but I met with one of the guys that ran Twitter's simulation engine. And so what Twitter was simulating was every single Twitter handle was represented as an agent.
Mm-hmm.
And then what they were running simulations on was any change in marketing or any change in the product. How does that lead to all of those Twitter handles being monthly active users and have a different state in that agent-based model? And so they would just test every decision and they would forecast like, oh, like with these decisions that we make, monthly active users go up.
Yeah.
Would go down by this number or whatever. And so being that that's what their business model was pretty much based on from like a value perspective, they were using simulation to help answer those types of questions. So if we say like Twitter and the next 100 largest companies around that size are using simulation, how can we begin enabling everyday people for smaller and mid-sized businesses to access that type of technology? And I think by having our synthetic population out there for people, opening the models so that like others can just like use them as they want, those are all things that promote like an even larger adoption of the technique.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting, especially the kind of the open source play that a lot of companies either will be fully behind or not. And it sounds like you're one in the boat of sharing and sharing the information. Does that also help train the models to be more accurate or just create more possibilities that maybe you hadn't predicted or other companies hadn't thought about that overall kind of enriches the data set?
Yeah, there's probably like ways to view that as like enriching a data set, but also just enriching understanding of how the world works.
Yeah.
So inherent in our name, Epistemics, is epistemology. So like the study and understanding of knowledge creation.
Yeah.
So like that's something that like we look at as being able to better understand and for generate knowledge is like just like overall good thing for humanity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we hope that by having the models being open, that it can inspire creativity.
Yeah.
To like say, oh, this model is applied here. I'm applied in another use case. So one example of this would be, let's see, we have a membership model.
Mm-hmm.
So like, let's say you're an organization and the value for your organization increases with the more members that you have.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that same membership model, if you pick it up and apply it into a political context, it's like, oh, cool. Like we're trying to get more people to vote for our candidate.
Sure.
Or we're a credit union. We're trying to get more people to sign up for our credit union. I'm an individual influencer and I'm trying to get more people like engaged in my content. Like it's a membership adoption or membership acquisition model that people can pick up and use in all sorts of different ways. And so a lot of human behavior, you could say is similar, but like when you change the context, you're just changing the parameters or what's influencing it.
Yeah.
So that's something that we believe by open sourcing can lead to larger adoption. We're also like pretty plugged in with different academics, like for research community, where open source is really important. And we're going to like have the name and like tout that we're all about human understanding and like truth. Like we need to if we were closed off, in the model, like that doesn't align with like the values of who we are as people. So
yeah, I love that. And tell us a little bit about the traction. How many people or how many companies are using Epistemic now? And what are you particularly excited about this next phase of growth this year and beyond?
yeah, right now 153.
Nice.
And so we're excited about that. It's across like a number of different industries. I'd say like the next phase of growth is really around like narrowing in on product market fit,
Sure.
how our software can be applied across the different verticals where people are interested in using agent-based simulation or working with the synthetic population. I hired my first salesperson a month ago. So we're now at like the point of like adding sales and adding customer success.
Right.
And culturally, how does that like fit in with the organization who's been very R&D and engineering focused?
Right.
Yeah. So for like the engineers, project-oriented people who are considering starting a company, like I guess you can kind of start on two ends of it. You're either like building a product like for a group of users and need to figure out, okay, how do we communicate this from a marketing, sales, branding perspective?
Yeah.
Or you're starting at like, well, I have this idea and I'm going to market and brand and like figure it out and then like build the company backwards from there.
Sure. Yeah.
There's all sorts of different ways that people come about it. We came about it from the like really deep science side of things and are now moving towards being a more customer success oriented organization.
Yeah. And what are some of the biggest challenges that you face today?
So like any founder, we haven't done a Series A yet, and like we're able to do that pretty soon. So let's say like any founder that's raised seed money, Series A, you're always worried about your runway. So
Sure.
for like current funding environment has been really tough over the last 10 months or so. And then like the event last week with SVB, it's add like another wrench into like any deal that was trying to get done this week, like immediately delayed is whether that fund has their money or like they were uncertain about their SVB thing. If they're switching banks, they're likely to have had a portfolio company that was having to deal with some panic. So there's always like the runway and funding type of challenge. There's always the making sure the team is the right team, still believe in what we're doing, like rowing in the right direction, rowing in the same direction, almost more important than rowing in the right direction.
Right.
So yeah, I'd say there's always the funding, connecting with customers, having the time to like really get the messaging down for the people that you're hoping to serve and work with. And then you always have to be concerned about the culture within your team.
Yeah.
So those are always the things that keep you up.
Yeah. Yeah. If everything goes well, what's the long-term vision for Epistemics?
So long-term vision is across, in the introduction, there's the health modeling, the social behavioral modeling, the environmental side of things, the economic models, that our synthetic population and using the synthetic population with the modeling language is just used across all of these different disciplines. And what that enables is an understanding of people now having conversation because it's same data source, right? To like provide the single source of truth. The models enable you to be open about your assumptions, and that creates more dialogue. So then you can have like just like more open democracy, more open decision making, especially on things that are influencing entire populations of people. So our goal is that we kind of become the standard for agent-based simulation, and agent-based simulation grows in its use case for helping decision makers with high stakes decisions that impact populations. So yeah, ideally we're tens of thousands of users around the world. That's where we want to go.
Amazing. And I would like the next question, I call it my founder FAQ. So I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire questions and then we'll see where we get.
Sure.
So first is, what's particularly hard about your job?
Managing my own energy.
Yeah. Yeah. And in regards to, if we think about similar technology that's out there and what it associates with agent-based modeling, how is it different from AI, and how does it, or is AI incorporated? What's its relationship to some of the more intelligent software technology or just products out there that we see? How is it different, but how is it similar in relationship to AI and ML and things along that nature?
Yeah. So some people would argue that like AI is within simulation or simulation within AI.
Yeah.
I'm indifferent to that. Like people are going to like have their religious doctrine about it. I don't need to convince them if they're a believer in one or the other.
Yeah.
I would say the difference between agent-based simulation and machine learning is machine learning getting more and more narrow. And sometimes those models are not explainable entirely. Like the math all works and like can get the understanding there, but like, all right, is that like really the outcome? Don't know. We're supposed to agent-based simulation. you can go back and look at every single time step, every single state that your population was generating, what state they were in. So the idea of explainable models, I think, is one difference, but also is like how AI, agent-based simulation, and machine learning can complement one another.
Yeah. What are some things that you've seen? What's one like really interesting and fascinating use case you've seen the product be used for? And what's one that you haven't seen it being used for, but that you would like it to see, like to see it used for?
Sure. So one fascinating one, there's the think tank for the broadband industry. The challenge that they had was like understanding what is going to be the adoption of like new at home, like VR type things that is going to put an increased strain on broadband requirements.
Yeah.
And it's like they're trying to forecast consumer tech adoption to then plan for the future of what the broadband network needs to look like. And they use like our platform to start simulating that, which I think was pretty cool.
Yeah.
One example of where like we don't have a ton of traction, but would love to see the traction grow is in health equity officers in health systems or like government related, with the whole idea of you have pots of money that you're going to make investments in that ideally should improve a health outcome for a population. And by simulating all the interactions, you're open about your assumptions, and ideally the money that's spent can actually improve those health outcomes over time. Beyond that, I'd say like education. In the United States, it's like we're looking at like, okay, we're investing all of this money in education, but like, are we really getting like improved outcomes? And if we're looking at improving graduation rates or the 8th grade reading level, like, can we get more people able to read a level across the country? Like, what compounding effects might that have in other areas? It's like, those are the cool use cases that I'd like to see people start to use simulation for.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so fascinating the different directions that this could go. And I'm even thinking about myself, different experiments I wanted to run, but it hadn't had a population to test them on, or haven't had it takes a lot of time, right? And the ability to have something do it almost on the back end while it's running, and then have this interface is extremely super valuable, not only for an individual, but as you said, for companies. What's something that as a founder, now, wish you learned earlier in your career?
I learn stuff like that every day or every week. I would say the importance of being vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that builds a lot of credibility and instills trust.
Mm-hmm.
So, I would do this with some of my advisors, like John, like, that you're not open about what the challenges really are. We don't know, and we can't help. And that's why we're here. And so I had to encourage that behavior with my own team.
Yeah.
I'd do it by modeling it myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's a big one. I think that's probably one that's not said enough on this episode or this show, which is the credibility piece that you said, the credibility that you gain from your investors, from your team, and probably even for yourself, I'm sure, in the ability to not maybe be, whether tied to the outcomes or however, or feeling that you have to fix every problem, but really leaning on the network of people. And I always like to ask this as well, is where do you find that network of founders, investors? Where have you gone to really build a team around you, or continue to go to build that network that supports, or at least is there with you along the journey?
Yeah. Like it happened organically. I haven't totally like pinned down exactly how I've done it. But it's been something I've been doing since I was a kid.
Yeah.
Even when I was like doing sports or asking other like grown up questions, I've kind of always had a group of older people who have gone through what I'm setting out to do. And I can learn from their mistakes, ideally.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I learn best when I haven't thought I might not look into it as be as critical about it. But I think when you're really in it as founder and you talk to others who have seen it before, like you want to look back and help others. So I'd say it's usually like through a connection of an existing advisor, like, oh, like I haven't gone through this, but I know somebody who has, like, just make the intro. And I think those are the strength of those like loose ties, and like people that the more open and honest you are with them, like the more they'll open up their network for you and say, oh, like so-and-so also went through this, chat with them. And it kind of just builds over time.
Yeah.
Well,
It's so fascinating to think about that it does build so organically, but it's the question, the communication that in the conversation pieces that continue that growth. And it's a lot of activity, but it's such small, consistent activity over time that leads to that growth. It's not just like, hey, here's this one person, and then all of a sudden you meet everyone, right? Sometimes it's that case, but oftentimes it's not. I always like to ask this question because founders are so brilliant at extracting knowledge from anything that they ingest, whether it's earlier in your career or now. What books or people have influenced you the most?
The book that really set me on this path is called The Health Gap. It's written by Michael Marmot. It was the book that inspired me to go into public health, that gave me the language to describe how I viewed the world.
Yeah.
And, like I even took it to the extent of like this guy, Len Syme at Berkeley. He was the guy who taught Michael Marmot for his understanding of social epidemiology and social determinants of health. And I even applied to like do a PhD program, training under that guy. Like that's how into that I was. So yeah, Health Gap, the big one. And then the Natural History of Innovation was another one by Stephen Johnson. It's kind of like the more popular book. Yeah, those two are really good. And then for any founder who's been doing it for a while, the hard thing about hard things is probably the best.
Yeah. It's almost gospel now for a lot of founders, and it really lends a lot. But I love the other ones and how kind of that brought you into the journey you are now. And I guess another question that I didn't ask that I meant to ask a little earlier came back to me. As a founder, I'm curious in terms of like your business model, how did you define your pricing, or how your relationship with your customers, being that the software sounds like it could be, if on your end, it could be sold by how much usage, how much data are you utilizing, how many models are you training, or how many outcomes are you looking for, what variables are you looking at it? It could be subscription model. It could be based on something else. Where did you land currently? And has that always been the business model you set forth?
No, it's evolved over time. And the best way that I could like frame it is you have to price to what your customers find their initial value in. Because if they're like, oh, like, well, I didn't find this thing valuable, but like it's cost me such and such amount, like people don't connect with that.
Yeah.
They actually price to the synthetic population now.
Wow.
And so because like people like see immediate value in that.
Yeah.
And so we had to reframe like, oh, we're selling this simulation engine. Well, people are like, okay, like, well, what do I do with that? Oh, the synthetic population.
Yeah.
These models. And they're like, oh, these are like the useful features of this thing. Yeah. Rather than saying you get immediate value, like people get value out of data, and when they can turn data into insights to then make a decision or inform a strategy, like those are like the valuable things that people latch on to. So we adjusted our pricing to align with our synthetic population, because the way that we put that data set together, people get immediate value out of it. And any future insights is also built on that synthetic population. So,
yeah. It's fascinating. And it's fascinating how that thing's changed. And I love that little anecdotal message there, which is price to what your customers find valuable, because I think that is something that goes undervalued or underutilized in a lot of companies as they look at popular pricing models or ways that people are interacting, the different features that you're using. But boiling it down to that, something so simple, I think is something that a lot of founders can kind of use and extract. And I always like to ask this question, because before we get into your plugs, I know we're close to the end of the episode here. Before we get into where we can find you and how we can support you, is there any question I didn't ask you that I should have, or that you would have liked to answer?
The question that I love that you did ask was like dream use case that is not happening already.
Yeah.
So like, I'm glad that you asked that. And like the company, internally we use this phrase, we're a for-profit with the heart of a nonprofit. Like we want our software to be used for good.
Yeah.
And so that's something that the public health use cases like want to drive on that. The equity use cases want to drive on that. The improving decisions that are happening at the city government level, like seeing all those things happen would be a dream come true for founders and like the people that join the team. So
amazing. Yeah. It's incredible to see not only how your technology works, but also how it's utilized in the different use cases. And I'm so excited to share this with the audiences and for any founders out there who want to start testing and utilizing the platform. Where can we find you? Where can we support? Where can we find Epistemics? And where can we support you as a founder? Give us your LinkedIn's, your Twitters, your website, anything that we can use to connect with you.
Yeah, epistemics.com/platform is how you sign. We got our fully automated, go to the website, log in, start building models on your own. System set up on December 7th. That took about 2.5 years to get to. So that's the place to get access to the software. The next conference I'll be at is Vive in Nashville, the healthcare focused conference. LinkedIn, John Cordier. And interested from a customer perspective, partnership perspective, investor perspective. Glad to connect.
Amazing. John, it was so interesting learning about your background, your experience, but also Epistemic, how the technology works, what it is being used for, and what future way they could be used for as well. And also all the little snippets of advice and wisdom that you've gained as a founder has always been super helpful for the show. And I hope you enjoyed yourself. And thank you again for being on Behind Company Lines today.
Yeah, thanks, Julian. You made it easy. Appreciate it.
Yeah.